Hi guys, I'm Melissa and I'm back with another video, and today it's time for my weekly wrap-up. It might be that I'll finish more books over the weekend, I'm not sure about that yet, but I won't have time to film any time later, so whatever I finish will be added to the next week's wrap-up. But I did manage to finish 5 things, so let's get into them. The first thing that I finished was Shatter by Tehereh and Mafi. This is the first book in the Shatter series, which now has she now has started a new spin-off series of this is following this girl. I already forgot her name. She has been in a sort of lockup for such a long time because she has a lethal touch that will basically kill everyone she touches. And one day when she wanted to help someone out, she actually accidentally killed them, and because of that she was sent to this asylum where she was not treated very well. And then one day she's whisked away from this to help being part of this army, this person's army who wants to use her powers for his purposes. And yeah, that's basically the gist of that. I feel like it has such a sort of a dystopian feel to it, even though it's fantasy because of the powers she has. So yeah, I think it's a mix of that. I think that it's a pretty cliche story compared to that. So I didn't know what to expect going into it because it's very hyped, but I also don't think that I was into that sort of story any longer. Maybe if I read it back in 2012 when it came out, I would have enjoyed it more, but as I went into it, I didn't hate it, but also didn't love it. And one of my least favorite things in general, in everything, is love triangles. I hate love triangles, and this centers pretty heavily around a love triangle. I don't think it's super insta-lovey in that way, but it is a little bit, which is also one of my least favorite tropes. But yeah, so it was not my favorite thing I read ever, but it was not terrible either. I give the ratings as follows. The characters gets a 6 out of 10 because I felt they were a bit cliche. The atmosphere is a pretty typical for that type of the YA that came out at that time, but I sort of also see the appeal, why a lot of people will enjoy it, so I give that a 7. The writing gets an 8 out of 10. I thought it was okay, it's better than what I read from Furthermore, which is a later book. So the plot, I didn't get along with that much. I give that a 6 out of 10. And the intrigue is a 5 out of 10. It took me a lot longer to read it than I anticipated. The logic also gets a 5 out of 10, and the overall enjoyment gets a 5 out of 10 to an average score of 6.0, and this gives a 3 out of 5 stars. So not terrible, but also not great, and I'm not considering continuing the series. The next thing that I finished was Lumberjanes Volume 1. This is one of my Humble Bundle books purchases. I read this on my iPad. This is a story about these girls who are part of the Lumberjane camp. They are part of the same specific room, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know, but it was super fun. I liked the magic system. I thought that the characters were very interesting, and the art style is something that I really get by. So the breakdown is as follows. The characters get an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I thought they were pretty great together, and I liked their friendship, and it was a good introduction to all of the characters in the first volume. The art style is something I really love. I think I can definitely see that Noelle Stevenson is one of the artists. It reminds me a lot of Nimona, some of the characters at least, and so that I like that quirky, edgy style that she has, and so I give that a 9 out of 10. The writing was also something I really enjoyed. I think the dialogue was great and the pacing was great, and so I give that a 9 out of 10. And I love the plot. The plot was funny, and I like how they added the different. They were all pretty smart characters, and they added that to some of the magical elements of the story, and I thought that was cool. And the overall intrigue, I read it mostly in one sitting, apart from 10 pages or something, so also 9 out of 10. And the logic gets a 9 out of 10 also because of the things that they added with the magic system. And the overall enjoyment gets a 10 out of 10, so it's definitely one I want to continue, and that gives an overall score of 9.0, and that gives a 5 out of 5 stars. So a good start to a series that I think I'm gonna really enjoy. The next one I finished was Poppy Sky, Boyband or Die by Joe Shine. This is a book about this man. He is known for just bursting into singing like all the time and so it always gets him into trouble. And one day he was taken prisoner or something like that, and he had one solution, and it was joining a boy band or he was going to die. That was the solution that he had, and I thought that the premise sounded very silly when I read about it. So I was like, this could go one or two ways. It could either be really, really done well and be a fun a quick read, or it could be done terribly bad and just fall very flat. And sadly it was the latter for me. I really did not enjoy this one. I think that the characters were terrible and the dialogue was not very good and the pacing was off, and I didn't care for anything about this book. So let's get into the breakdown. The characters gets a 3 out of 10. I didn't connect with the main character at all, or mostly any of the side characters. There's one side character that I like, that's why a score of 3 and not 1. The atmosphere gets a 4 out of 10 because I don't think that the author can capture the setting very well. I think that, the writing was very mediocre, so I give that a 5 out of 10. The plot was not something I could get by with. I think that he executed it pretty poorly, and so I give that a 2 out of 10. The overall intrigue gets a 3 out of 10 because I didn't really care for it. It was short, but it took me way too long to read it. The logic gets a 2 out of 10 because, there were some things that didn't add up, and it didn't work for me, and the plot was done terribly. The overall enjoyment was a 2 out of 10, not my thing. I really didn't enjoy it, and this gives an overall score of 3.0, and it gives an overall rating of 2 out of 5 stars. The next one I finished was Dødens Terning by Kenneth Bøgh Andersen. This is the second book in Den Store Djævlekrig. This is, in English, this is called Death's Die, and it is the second book in the Big Devil's War, the Great Devil War, or whatever. This follows Philip. Philip is a young boy who, in the first book, we follow him as he is mistaken for another boy and accidentally comes to hell to help, as he's supposedly going to be taking over the job as the devil himself. Because the devil had become ill because of something. And so there's a bit of a mystery to that one. But now Philip is back in the real world again, after what happened in the first one, and so in this one he's actually swept back into hell when Death loses his die, the die that determines how long the humans have left to live. And someone stole it from him, so he can't do the thing, so his job and everyone who are being born are basically undead and won't die because there's no one to throw that die to determine how many years that said person is going to get. So this takes Philip in because Death wants Philip's help to help him find it, so that is the mystery of this one. I really enjoyed this one. It was a good take on this topic, and so I'm gonna get into the breakdown. The characters get a 9 out of 10. I really enjoy Philip and Satina. Satina is the female lead in this one, or Philip's friend, or love interest, if you will. And they both really developed in this one. I think that they had added some layers to the characters that I really appreciated, and I think that some of the side characters that were introduced were really interesting, and there was not a lot of things to put on this. The atmosphere gets a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed this. It was pretty dark and pretty fitting for the setting, but still kept it in a tone so that the audience who is young adult or younger young adult, I'll say, they can follow along and read it, and it will still fit for them. The writing is really great, and Kenneth Bøgh is also the one that narrated the audio, which I listened to, and he does that really, really well. So I give that a 9 out of 10. The plot gets a 10 out of 10 because in not very far between, I read 2 books that were really similar plot-wise, but handled super differently. But I really loved both of them, so I give that a 10 out of 10. The intrigue gets a 9 out of 10. I was almost invested from the beginning. I think it took me like a couple of chapters to get into this book, because we started out with Philip just being in school in the real world, and that didn't really do very much for me. But as soon as it started getting a little darker, this really got interesting. The overall logic gets 9 out of 10. I think that Kenneth and Andersen handled this topic very well, and I have not very many things to put on this at all. And the overall enjoyment gets a 9 out of 10 because I really enjoyed this. It was a good sequel, and I'm definitely invested in this series now and can't wait to find out more. So yeah, this gets an overall score of 9.14, and this gives a 5 out of 5 stars. The last and final thing that I finished over the past week was Taste of Marrow by Sarah Gailey. This is the second and final book in her River of Teeth duology. The River of Teeth duology is a sort of alternative history take on the fact that if the American government back at the time had decided they were considering taking these hippos into the marshlands, into the rivers of Mississippi and stuff, to and the swamps to help along with some things, but these are feral beasts and they're very dangerous, so luckily they didn't do that. But this is the alternative history if that happened. And this follows Houndstooth, who is one of the main characters of this one, and he has brought up hippos on his ranch to and sort of to tame them and to use them so that you can actually use these in a way that they are not super dangerous. But someone burns his whole farm down, along with all of the hippos except I think 2, I don't remember how many were there left. And Houndstooth is very, very angry and out for revenge and wants to destroy whoever did that. And he finds out who does it, and so he's on a vengeance trip, and that is where River of Teeth starts. And so this one is basically following along after the events that happens in that one, and I can't get into a lot about the plot of this one without going into spoilers. However, I think that this one tied up pretty well. It had a little bit of a slow start, but I ended up enjoying it by the end of it, and this is my breakdown. The characters get an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. They were all pretty flawed, and that's something I enjoyed. And Houndstooth is one of my favorites of them all. But because of all of the flaws, it also just made for a really interesting read, and some characters that you got invested in, even if they were morally grey in very many places. The atmosphere gets a 6 out of 10. I don't think that the author captured this atmosphere as well as he did in the first one, but still it was okay. The writing gets a 6 out of 10. I also thought that could be better, especially because the first part I was not super hooked, but I really enjoyed the last half of it. So 6 out of 10. The plot gets a 7 out of 10. I think that it was okay, but it was not the best. The intrigue, it took me a little longer to get into it, but I ended up really being invested in it, and I thought it wrapped up really nicely, so I give that an 8 out of 10. The logic gets an 8 out of 10 as it tied up things that were needed to be tied up, and that was great. And the overall enjoyment gets an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this overall duology, and this book was great, and I had fun while reading it. So yeah, overall score is 7.28, and it gives an overall rating of 4 out of 5 stars. So a pretty decent reading week for me this week. The only thing that nagged me was the couple of 2-3 stars reads that I read, but you can't always read only 5-star books. I hope that I will have a lot of great books to talk about next week as well. However, next week will be I'll probably post the video on Saturday because on Sunday I won't be home at all, so I won't be able to read or finish anything or upload anything. So just for the record. So this is all I have for today. Definitely let me know in the comments down below if you've been reading anything interesting this past week. And if you've read any of the books that I've been reading today, what were your thoughts on them? If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Goodbye.